Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Angie Wallace, and I am the Director of Interior Training for the PYA, and I head the Welfare Group. For those of you that aren't that familiar with the Welfare Group, we are volunteers, and our aim is to support and guide your crew and ensuring that your well-being is safeguarded. We have had, we've held webinars before, sorry. Just in case you haven't seen them or you would like to have a watch or a replay or whatever, please do head over to the PYA Welfare Group YouTube channel, and that's where you'll see the past recordings, and we will also post the recording of this webinar today. So today we're going to be having a very frank discussion on the reporting of harassment, sexual harassment and abuse in the yachting industry. Looking at from the perspective of when a crew member should report, how to report, the consequences and what the outcome should or could be. We've got an incredible lineup of panelists today for you, and they're all experts in their field, and they will be sharing their knowledge, their experience and their insights with us today. So please let me introduce you to Fanny Lecadre, who is a French maritime lawyer. Hi, Fanny. Robb Mass, a US maritime attorney. Thank you, Robb. James Hatcher from Cayman Islands is the shipping master. Marianne Richards, representing Hill Robinson. Louise Overend, representing YPI Recruitment. Captain Tom Glanville, and last but very not least, our wonderful Captain Kelly Gordon, who is going to be co-hosting this webinar with me today. Thank you all so much. I am, as I say, anticipating this is going to be quite a live little session today. So if you have any questions, please do pop them into the Q&A and we will endeavour to get to them. If we do run out of time, I do apologise in advance, but we will endeavour to answer and get back to you as soon as we can. So without further ado, Kelly, could you please be so kind to kickstart this webinar off and give us some hard facts and statistics?
Yes, let me do this. And so this is something I think that you all know I've been studying for a while now. And I actually launched my own survey to really get into some good statistics and get some hard answers. And I have a surprisingly 1,036 respondents so far. And that is a huge amount for any of you that have ever launched a survey of this kind. And I often have referred to Key Crew's survey as well, and they usually wind up around with 800 to 1,000 respondents as well. So I'm really happy with the number of respondents that I've got in the survey. And so this data that I want to share to you is just really going to give you this is from crew members from every department within. And so I just want to start with a very basic, since we're talking about bullying and harassment and how that really has a strong correlation to your mental health. And the first question that I want to share with you is, has your mental health suffered or declined since you've joined the yachting industry? 47% say yes. Has the effect that the industry has had on your mental health caused you to consider other careers, thus leaving the industry? 22% say frequently, and 46% say sometimes. When we get specifics into sexual harassment and to bullying, have you had to grapple with sexual harassment or assault at some point in your career? 36% say yes. Have you witnessed it or known others within the industry who have experienced sexual harassment? 69% say yes. Have you experienced bullying during your onboard experience? Guys, 71%. And then, from your experience, do you find the bullying comes from which department? And I divvied this up between captain, interior, exterior, engineering, and then shoreside. 29% comes from captains, and 29% comes from the interior. And one of Key Crew's survey pieces of data that I'd like to cite also is that you're twice more likely to get bullied on the interior by the exterior. But this was really alarming to me, especially with the bullying statistics, that 71% of us have experienced that. And over half of the bullying is coming from captains and the interior. And guys, this is 1,036 survey respondents, and these are questions that I've sent out directly to crew in this industry, and this is what the data has come back as. So we've got some work to do.
We do. I know Russell Potter has actually asked, how do these statistics compare to other industries? We're not in other industries, so we don't really have those statistics. But I am aware that obviously that there are statistics in the UK in different countries. But we are in this industry and we are focusing on what's happening in our industry. But thank you for the question. Very shocking. In a way, not surprising. You know, we are a small industry and it's a little melting pot, isn't it? Tom, who in your capacity as a captain, I mean, we know what should happen, but who should the crew go to if they feel that they've been harassed?
Well, I think it depends. I mean, there's also a lot of different situations. So, for example, the size of your vessel, how formally it's run, and what the circumstance is. For example, it's difficult to complain to the captain if it is the captain who's the issue. But I think initially you should try and start on board. There are some good documents like the Code of Safe Working Practices, which gives you an idea of what is and what is not acceptable on board. And that can form a basis of a conversation. If you can deal with the perpetrator directly, I think it's going to happen at some stage. Maybe the issue can be dealt with straight away. If not, then you have to escalate it through the hierarchy. So that's department heads, captains. So that would be the initial phase on board. If that doesn't work, or as I say, the issue is with your department head or the captain, then obviously you have to go off board. First step is your management company, because there's not many other arbitrators available. But management company, if that really doesn't work, you could go to flag. And if it's something very, if it's something that a crime has been committed, then you will have to go to the police. And that is something that needs to be impressed on crew. You must have the confidence. If you're genuinely convinced that it's a crime, there's no way you're going to avoid going to the police. So do that early. I think that's the hierarchy.
Well, yeah. Angela, let me just say one thing, and that is typically in the SEA or in the SMS or in a crew manual or handbook, there's a complaint procedure.
Absolutely.
And the first thing you do is work your way through the complaint procedure because you've agreed contractually that that's the process you'll follow. And generally that is, as Tom described, you're kind of going up the hierarchy. You'll start perhaps with the department head, but then it certainly would go to the captain. If it is the captain, then you generally go directly to the management company, if there is one, or the owner.
Rob, I want to, since you're in the US, you and I are both in the US, and I've spent my whole entire career on US flagged vessels, and have never run on anything but. And US flagged and private, and we don't oftentimes sign SEA agreements on US flagged vessels. And even on your smaller vessels, you also might not always have a management company. So speak for any of the US crew flagged vessels in here and how that works, because for every US flag that I've been on, the agreement that has been signed has been back through like the home office or the company and not a standard SCA agreement.
Well, one thing unique to the United States is the Coast Guard, fairly recently, in the last few years, is now requiring, it's mandatory, that you report to the Coast Guard any allegation of sexual harassment, and that they are then obligated to investigate. But short of that, it's more of a common sense thing then. If it's something involving a crew member, you go to the captain. If it's something involving the captain, then you'd have to go to the owner. And if all that fails, there may be outside remedies. I mean, for example, it's still not clear whether sexual harassment violates the Jones Act, if it's just oral. But if it's coupled with any form of physical assault, then it becomes definitely a potential Jones Act claim. So there's, there are a slew of remedies under U.S. law. I mean, we have anti-harassment statutes, both state and federal. But I think on the boat itself, you would still follow the hierarchy, and by law, you're required to the operator, which is defined broadly, the captain, manager, owner, is required to report it to the Coast Guard.
And we have a really nice app. There's an app that you can report to directly with the Coast Guard as well.
Yeah.
Any sort of harassment. So that's for any of you that are on U.S. flagged vessels, know that.
The trouble is also, we've got a lot of European base and also blue water crew. And depending, as you say, Tom, it does depend on the size of the vessel. If you're on a 35 meter, you've got what, 4 or 5 crew working? It's your fellow crew member that potentially you have an issue with. And let's not forget as well, and I know it's a very subject, is the fact that what about if you've been falsely accused? What's the investigation going to be on board before it goes outside? So that's something that I think that we will return to and think about. But going to Fanny and to Robb, can you please explain to everybody, is there a difference between bullying and harassment? And when does it actually become a crime?
I can answer on the basis of French law, because that's what I know. So I picked up the latest definition of harassment under French law that was issued in 2014. And harassment is defined as repeated words or behaviors that have the purpose or the effect of degrading working conditions. So when I look at the definition of bullying and harassment, for me, under French law, both bullying and harassment come under this incriminating law, and both are the same under come under this definition. So I would say both can be crimes. And the problem under French law, but we'll probably talk about it in more detail, is the problem of proof, evidence.
Mm.
And Fanny, that is a criminal statute, not just a civil statute?
Yes, that's a criminal law. It's in the criminal code. And then we have also other definitions. In sexual harassment, we have a definition under the criminal code, French criminal code, and under the labor code.
Okay.
Right.
Of course, in the United States, we have kind of overlapping jurisdictions between federal and states, and every state law may vary. There are federal statutes and there are state statutes, but generally, if it's just verbal, could be written, harassment, that's generally civil. If it's coupled with any form of physical assault, and I'm not talking necessarily just rape, but some form of physical assault, then it becomes criminal.
Mm-hmm. So then, sort of reading between the lines, when should a situation be taken to an attorney, to a lawyer?
Well, my view on that is just if you don't get what you feel is appropriate treatment or relief, or that action isn't taken, say, to discharge the offender, that's when you have to go outside. You should at least proceed internally before doing that. But if all fails, then you have to go outside. And
what information would you require, both Fanny and Robb as well, looking at two different hemispheres here a little bit? So what information would you require from somebody to bring to the table in order for you to take the case on?
Well, procedurally, there are 2 routes in France you can take. You can take the criminal route, but you can also take the labor case route. What we need is proof. So we need proof of the actions. So that can be given either if there are written proofs like emails or texts or witnesses. Witness statements that can be provided, and also we've talked about it, but medical proof to prove that the working conditions have been degraded and that the health of the person who's being harassed or bullied has been degraded. It can be a psychologist or any doctor.
What I would add to that, and it's something Fanny alluded to earlier, which in the difficulties of proof, is a lot of these become, if it's an isolated incident, it becomes he said, she said, and that's difficult. Yeah. If it's, but even in that case, I think it's important that the victim speak about it to others at the time it occurs, because otherwise you come back months later and they're going to say, well, if this is so serious, why didn't you report it? And then if the conduct is repetitive over a period of time, you should keep a diary or an agenda. Look, on this day, so-and-so said this to me, or, touched me inappropriately, whatever it may be. And so were there to witness, so that when you go to an attorney, you have a record of what happened that the attorney can follow.
When it comes to sort of witness statements and sort of like the diary, again, could a diary become a he said, she said? I could write anything into my diary, couldn't I? That of something that's happened. It's kind of, again, quite difficult.
Witnesses are key. I mean, if every time it happens, somebody has cornered a woman and it's just one-on-one, there's no proof. And but it is important to talk about it contemporaneously with others. It is important to report it, because if you don't, it's more likely to be asserted that it didn't happen.
Yeah. And I think it's also good to mention, as Sandra has just said, that should include the impact that it's had on the individual and also the harm as well that it's caused. Sorry, I'm harping on at you two a little bit, but would there be like a statute of limitations? So say, for example, and situations that have come across my desk where somebody has been sexually assaulted quite a few years ago, but at that time didn't have the courage to go to the police, didn't have the courage to go and seek medical help, and now, wants to speak out. Would there be a time limit that they could actually take legal action?
Yes, under French law, it's 6 years.
6 years. Okay, thank
And
you.
I want to pose a question as well to the group with an example. A few months back, and this is unfortunate, a friend reached out to me for help from 2 women that had reached out to her, unfortunately, back to back. And they were in the US working on a B1, B2. Both women, unfortunately, had been raped, and they were afraid to go to the police because they were working in the US without a contract. So the fear was that if I go to the police and I report this rape, and then anyone digs and they see that I'm over here working without a contract on my B1, B2, then I'm going to be exported from the industry. This is my job. This is my career. This is my life. Then I can't come back to the US and work. Then what happens? And, the first thing that comes to my mind is, gosh, you've been raped. You need to go to the hospital and you need to report this. The hell with whether you have a contract or not. But then the other side of me is sitting here thinking, oh my God, what were you thinking? Taking work and not having a contract, knowing that you're over here on a B1, B2. So explain in a situation, and I guess I want to emphasize, I have questions about that, is would it have come about that they were in the US without a contract? Would they have possibly been, expelled from the US? But then I also want to just reiterate the importance of taking a job without a contract. Just don't do it. It's not worth it.
Absolutely. Rob, US attorney.
Yeah.
What would happen in that situation?
It's dependent on the victim, but I don't know, Kelly, that the police would be so interested in your immigration or one's immigration status. And if she has a B1 and she's working under the terms of the B1, which could include working a U.S. vessel if the boat is moving in and out of the U.S., I don't think the lack of a contract is going to excite anyone. I think
they were both day working.
Oh, well, that's a little bit more difficult then. But it's like in the U.S. generally, we have a lot of issues with undocumented aliens. I mean, people who are illegally in the U.S. And generally speaking, the police don't inquire as their immigration status, and in some instances, some states may not. And to me, the rape so transcends these other concerns. Easier for me to say I'm not in the U.S. On a temporary basis, but you got to report it. I mean, it's up to the woman, but it's one thing
You
that
have to.
she needs to remember. It's also for all the other women out there.
You're right, Angie, or the men.
Or the men. It's not just women that are abused and harassed and
Right.
assaulted. It is also
certainly true. But let me put it differently. It's for all the other crewmen out there. If there is a rapist in their midst, he's not going to just do it once.
Mm. We have found that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another question come in about navigating producing evidence when harassment or assaults happen verbally and it's in a one-to-one. Again, I think that comes down to your diary, how it has impacted you, and the harm that you have endured under that. And there's another question from Management Company that I'm going to wait a little bit and come to Marianne for, but I'm just heading over to James now. James, from a flag state point of view, when should a crew member go to the police? Should they go to the police beforehand? Should they contact you beforehand? What's the circumstances from flag state that they're going to take over and investigate a harassment and abuse or a bullying case?
Okay. Well, first things first. Obviously, the flag state is not the police. We have very, very different powers and responsibilities. We cannot act as the police. Obviously, in the Cayman Islands, the police force is based in the Cayman Islands, and any crime that is a crime committed on a Cayman Island ship that would be a crime in the Cayman Islands is treated as if it was a crime in the Cayman Islands, and the police may well get involved. That said, they are getting from the Cayman Islands is not going to be as easy as getting to the police in the place where the incident happened. So I would always encourage somebody to report it to the police where it's happened, because they will have jurisdiction, obviously. And obviously I can't speak on behalf of the Cayman Islands police, but I would strongly suspect they would defer to the local police because they're the ones on the ground, and obviously it gets a bit messy when you've got mixed jurisdiction. So yes, the police can get involved in the Cayman Islands, and obviously we can act as a conduit on that, but we aren't the police. But I would strongly suggest people consider speaking to the police where they are, and also, as a priority, seek medical attention as soon as possible, and they will be able to help you get in touch with the police as well. But yeah, it's a case of deciding yourself whether you think it meets the criteria for being a crime, and then in the place where you are, and speak to the police if you can. Obviously, that's a big step, and it's someone's choice, but obviously strongly encourage it. If you do want to get the Cayman Islands police involved, obviously you can come through the flag. We will obviously act as conduit. You'll need to give as much evidence as you can, which we can pass through, or if you just wish us to put you in touch. But we can't get any involved any further than that, other than basically just as a go-between. On what the flag can do under the MLC, which obviously only applies to certain boats, there is a requirement to have a bullying and harassment policy in place where the MLC applies. All vessels will have to have that if the MLC applies. We might be able to take action if that's not followed, but that would not that's not been tested yet, because it's only it doesn't set what the policy is. It just says they have to have a policy in place. So if they've got a policy in place or not got one in place, and they don't follow it, or we may well be able to take sort of flag action, but that's not necessarily going to help the seafarer. So ultimately, speaking to the police where you are, or if you don't, or Cayman Islands, but preferably the police, and again, always go to speak to the medical. Just before going back earlier, I'll just confirm that where MLC applies, you have to have a complaints procedure in place. It'd be an offence not to have one, and obviously we have guidance, and other flags do, about how that should be. It's all about speaking, trying to deal at the lowest level, and the process you go through. But there is always a right to speak to the flag, and obviously for the Cayman Islands that would be me. And obviously we can get involved if it's a potential breach of the merchant shipping laws, or advise you on speaking to the police and the like. And yeah, I think that's it. But yeah, please speak to the police.
Question: could you also, can the Cayman Islands pull someone's ticket over something like that?
We do not issue tickets. We do endorsements of people.
Endorsements, same effect.
It's a difficult one. I mean, obviously, we do have a process for undertaking inquiries into fitness to hold a certificate. Obviously, that's obviously only officers, because they're the only ones who acquire if they're on a minimum safe manner document. There can be an inquiry. It follows very much the way that the UK inquiries have done. When we did the new Merchant Shipping Act this year, we slightly streamlined the process. It used to be very different for officers and seafarers, the inquiry, but now we've streamlined them together. So it's possible that could be done. It's still, I would have thought, better to go to the where the certificate was issued from, rather than the endorsement.
So I want to go back a little bit. So let's say you're being bullied on board, and let's say you're the deckhand, or you're a junior stew. You take it to your department head, that doesn't work. So then you take it to your captain, that doesn't work. Or the bullier is your captain. So then you take it to management, and then management and the captain have been buddies for 20 years. So that's not going to work. So then is the next step flag? And then, James, you may kind of have already answered this, but then let's say a crew member says, look, I've gone to the captain, I've gone to management, nothing, I'm here at flag. So then does flag come onto the boat at any point and say, you know, look, we've got some issues with some bullying on here, reports have been made? And does flag say at any point ever go onto the boat and try to sort this issue out? I mean, if you've got a bad egg in the bunch, and the captain or management's not taking care of it, can then flag take care of it?
Flag is not HR, though. I think that's one of the things we have to really make it clear. You need to remember that what would you do in an onshore thing, where basically it's the same as onshore. We're not. You've got we can say that you have to have these systems in place, processes, because the MLC requires it, and obviously in the US the MLC doesn't even apply. So obviously anyone who works on a US flag, it'd be a completely different situation. But we could probably get involved if they're not following their procedures, but I don't think we could get involved in a HR issue.
So then I just want to say to any crew, especially any junior crew that are listening, you don't have to stay put. If you're on a boat and it's a bad situation, there are so many boats out there looking for good crew members. And if you're not getting resolve, just move on. That quite possibly could be the best thing for you to do if you're on a boat where you've got a lot of bullying or a lot of sexual harassment and you can't get anything done. At least the least thing you can do is move to a better, safer, healthier boat.
Yeah.
Coming back to you, James, just briefly again. We've kind of sort of focused on if there's been an harassment or an abuse situation and everything, go to the police, go and seek medical help. What happens when you're in the middle of the ocean?
In that sense, then obviously there wouldn't be split jurisdiction. That would be a pure outside 12 miles. It would purely be Cayman Islands jurisdiction. So we could pass that on to the police for them to invest to consider. But obviously they wouldn't be able to do anything until it gets to the next port. So that's, I mean, this is really hypothetical. I've never had that happen before or reported to me anyway.
Oh, I've heard many stories about that. So
But
yes,
not
it's not
reported to me.
hypothetical.
But that obviously it's the same with any crime at sea. Now that would be exclusive Cayman jurisdiction, but clearly they're not going to send out helicopters into the middle of the ocean and stuff, are they? So I don't think. But
No, but what I'm just, and this is actually quite hypothetical because nobody's had the bravery, I suppose, to do it. But let's say there had been a situation that happened at sea, and the person managed to get hold of you, either sent an email or a message or whatever, and said, this has just happened to me. I am at sea. I'm on a Cayman Island flag vessel. We are heading into such and such a port. Could you send help? Could you alert the services in that port to then detain that vessel whilst an investigation happens?
I think so. I think what we would probably do in that sense is inform the is through the Foreign Office, because the UK obviously we're in the Red Ensign group, so the UK is responsible for the Cayman Islands and other British territories foreign relations. We would probably go through the Foreign Office to get in touch with the local consular embassy, and they would do that. I mean, obviously it's we've not had that, but we during COVID, for instance, we did do things like that when there was issues with getting people off who were ill and stuff. So it has been a process that's been used. Yeah. So I think in that sense, but that would be the thing to do. Or the Cayman Islands police potentially could speak through. Obviously, they'll have their own systems how the police work, where they may be able to speak directly to local police forces, which we would obviously not know about or have any involvement in. But if we were informed of a potential serious crime, we'd obviously inform the Cayman Islands police, and then they would determine what they wanted to do as well.
Okay, great. Marianne, I'm going to bring you into the fold now. What do you do as a management company when a crew member comes to you with a case of bullying or harassment or abuse on board of one of your yachts? What steps do you do, and how do you follow up?
Well, obviously there's, as we're speculating here, there's lots of different scenarios. So every scenario is going to be slightly different. But for sure, we'll start some form of inquiry. So often the employer, because we're not the employer, there's a separate employment company, will appoint us to handle an inquiry. And we can do that remotely. If we had something serious, like we were just talking about, and a boat was going into port and we were concerned, we would put somebody there to handle it in person. Otherwise, we'll do as much investigation as we can remotely. We'll try and find witnesses, but as we've all touched on earlier, often it's he said, she said. So it can be very hard. I think, Captain Kelly, you're right. Sometimes the kids, especially the younger crew, they just have to get off. They're never going to prove anything. But we offer a lot of support. If there is any kind of physical assault, we'll make sure all the medicals are done. We'll consult with the local authorities. Going back to time lag, I know we had an incident at the shipyard in Holland once, and there was 2 years after you've reported it. You have 2 years to then go back and put a case out. So, so the crew member in that instance went along to the local police and reported the incident, but didn't follow it up. But they just logged it. We've got a 24/7 helpline for all of our crew through ISWAN. It's a Hill Robinson funded helpline. So we make sure that both sides of the complaint have access to that, because at this point, if it's he said, she said, they both need support. If there's any danger, they're on board, we'll make sure they get off. And if it's he said, she said, they both get off, and they're both put in separate safe places, maybe sent home while we carry out the investigation.
Thank you.
So we can offer, you know, as I say, every single case is quite different. And we have had all sorts of things, just from comments through to rape accusations.
What about, and this is just to come through actually from her, but thank you for bringing this up, and it actually is quite relevant as well for Tom and for Marianne. What happens when you have a junior crew member saying, my HOD is bullying me all the time, the captain's bullying me all the time, but actually it's about directives and it's about managing the team. How do you deal with that situation where it's like, no, this isn't bullying, this is actually your job, you have to follow your job?
I don't know if Tom wants to answer that because he's there, but I mean, it's clear that sometimes there's a misunderstanding as to what bullying is. You know, being
I
asked
don't
to
know.
read
I
self-
don't think there should ever be a blurred line in between bullying your crew and asking them to do their job. If you are a respectable human being and a good leader, it is very clear that you're just asking them to do your job. If you are bullying them, there's a clear distinction between the two. There's not, you could ask any of my crew and they would never feel, when I'm asking them to do their job, that I'm bullying them. There's a stark contrast in between the two.
Tom?
I think by definition, it's a complicated industry, and it's hard work. And by definition, you have phases where you need people to do their role and to do things, and they may not want to do them, and that leads to conflict. And as a master, your job is to deliver the thing, and there is the whole element of command. So I think it can get. I think the way you deal with things and how you communicate is key, and it has to be respectful and it has to be correct. But at the same time, you know, sometimes you do have to be direct with people and say, either this is the result we need, and either it gets done or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, then that's going to be the end of the road. So I think it's got to, communication from captains has got to be good, it's got to be clear, and it's got to be fair. And that's also why it's good for these things to be done as is listed in standard grievance procedures, is to be able to have third-party witnesses from the crew, both sides being involved. And if I have a conflict on board, that's often what I'll do. I'll get, you know, I'll bring someone, they can bring someone, it's all witnessed, it's all documented, it's all written down, and it's all presented to everybody's given a record of it afterwards. So if anyone's unhappy and thinks it was unfair, they can then take it up, and then I'll be in a position to defend myself. So, you know, it's I think, but I do think there is a lot of bullying, and I think a lot of masters maybe and HODs don't necessarily have those skills of people management. That maybe not how they got into their position.
You're right, Tom. And I said this the other day, you know, 90% of our training only pertains to 10% of our job, which is driving and navigating and that sort of thing. But 90% of our job is only 10% of our training. You know, we get a couple of leadership courses. So, you know, we rise to our craft, the top of our skill set, by being good at our craft. And along the way, nobody teaches us about leadership. And Herb's right. You know, the vetting of crew and different leadership styles, and making sure that your captains and your department heads are good leaders. And it's, yes, could the industry do a better job of providing more coursework and opportunities for us to learn as a leader? Yes, they could. But we also need to do our own self-study, and we also need to be responsible for ourselves in terms of learning how to be a good leader. I read or watch or something every day, even if it's just 5 minutes, maybe it's an hour, but I'm always trying to up my level of leadership. And I'm sure you are, Tom, too, just from hearing the way that you're speaking. And I want to go back to something that Tim Clark said. He commented, he said, if you fix leadership, you fix a lot of these issues. And one in my survey, one of the biggest, I think number 4, is a lack of leadership as to why crew are leaving or why they're finding, a decline in their mental health. So yeah, Herb, you're right about, the leadership and the need for that. And so, yeah, just my
I will say,
thoughts on that.
I would just like to bring Louise now in, because talking about vetting crew and everything, Louise, you're a recruitment agent and you have a good connection with crew looking for jobs. You will hear through the grapevine of certain crew members, certain captains, certain HODs that have a really bad reputation, and yet they've still not been caught. They're still out there perpetrating and victimizing and abusing crew. They're abusing their rank and their power. As a recruitment agent, if you hear of a vessel with that sort of reputation, what actions have you or can you take? Is there anything that you can do, and how do you protect your recruits?
I mean, obviously we make an informed decision. We, when we do take jobs in, we do have things in place. So we check the MLC certificate, to make sure that their crew are protected. Obviously, we have something called a Know Your Client as well, where we, do a thorough check as well. But, obviously we feel a very strong duty of care for our candidates, especially, for the junior ones that are coming in, that, this, if something happens to them on board, it's not just a case of how's it going to, affect their career tomorrow. It's like, it's something that could traumatize them for the rest of their lives. So, we take that very, very seriously. Obviously, if we do hear, we do have, recruitment agencies do have a good network. We've, a lot of them have been going for several years. We know everyone at, a certain level, the captains, chief officers, chief engineers. So we do get to know, with our reference checks, and obviously whenever we speak to candidates, if they leave the job, we give them a little exit interview and, try and find out what happened on board. So we do get to build a picture of, who perhaps, is, that shouldn't be, in the position that they're in. And for us, as I said, we would never, we protect our candidates. We would never put them in a situation where they would ever be bullied or or anything like that, or harassed. And, we would take that very seriously.
One of the problems we have, I mean, I've been involved in 2 serious harassment complaints that resulted in dismissal of, in the first instance, captain, and second instance, the first officer. And generally what happens is they're simply dismissed before there's a formal finding of culpability. And if someone comes to that owner or the manager asking for a letter of recommendation about the person, generally for fear of a suit by the dismissed person, they'll typically say, well, yes, he worked on this boat from this date to this date, and just leave it at that. I mean, that's common, at least in the US, and employment situations, for fear of suit. And all this results in is sort of like the problem the Catholic Church had with problem priests that were just removed from one parish and put in another. And that's what happens. These people move on, but their actions don't change.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the worrying thing, that there are people out there in high-ranking positions abusing that power, and they're just moving from one boat to the next, from one jurisdiction to the next, and there's no follow-through. And I know that this comes to IMO level as to trying to vet crew and to vet, captains and so forth. And at the end of the day, we're working for the most wealthiest people in the world. Why aren't crew more vetted? It should be. There should be random drug testings. There should be random audits on the boats. There should be more. professionalism surrounding this. You know, we are really in such a free-for-all in so many respects, and that's not right.
Yeah,
Angie, you're right. There's a huge sickening abuse of power in this industry. You hit the nail on the head with that.
Thank you. And I think we also need to look at, why don't crew report? What's the stigmas behind this? And, you know, I mean, obviously, I know from my experience trying to help crew and from the welfare issues, like, well, why didn't you report this? Well, the captain, who is the perpetrator, he told me that I'll never get another job, that my career would be ruined, that it would be a he said, she said, and he's the captain after all. So why on earth would he be believed? If, of course, it's going, you know, it's going to be you. You're a little minion, so you know, nobody's going to believe you. That's very, very real for so many people. And I mentioned females, but it's also males in the industry. So how can we collectively safeguard that? And this goes out to all of you, the panel.
Well, people have to start talking up, don't they? We're at the start of the yachting kind of Me Too thing, aren't we, really? Not enough is said.
And that's something that I say every time I speak or every time I present, is you have a moral obligation to yourself and the rest of your crew to speak up. And as tough as that may be, and I was junior crew at once, and I get it, and I get that it's scary. And, you know, and I understand that there are captains out there saying, you know, that I'll blackball you, you'll never get a job. First of all, captains talk. We know the good ones, we know the bad ones. And if there is a captain out there trying to blackball a specific crew member, we very likely know the source that it's coming from. So if you're a crew member listening and you're worried about that, I would say don't, because us good ones know the good ones and we know the bad ones. So we understand the source. But going back to this, speaking up, you have a right. And if you don't speak up, not only are you perpetuating the problem, you're ultimately becoming part of it. And I know that's hard to hear and to think, and especially to be junior crew, but you must stand up for yourself.
And remember too, that your complaint by itself may not have much impact, but if everyone reports every time something like this happens, you have 4 or 5 people talking about a single offender, that's going to carry weight. But if all of them stay silent, then nothing will happen.
Exactly. Now, let me put this to you. We've been talking about crew harassing and bullying and abusing crew. What happens when it's the owner?
It's a nightmare.
Yeah, I think that's really difficult.
I mean, at the end of the day, we could be talking big money, couldn't we, really? But, you know, how would a crew member navigate the fact that the owner is committing some sort of heinous act or is bullying or harassing? As a captain, Tom, Kelly, how would you get involved? What would you do in these circumstances?
I've lost my video, but can you still hear me?
We can. Thank you, Tom. Yeah.
So I think from my point of view of that, is we go back to something that Kelly said earlier. And that is that not everybody is nice in the world, and that's a fact. And there are some battles that you can't win. And honestly, I've worked for some owners that have not been very nice, but I didn't survive very long. And before I was like, well, that's my limit. And so you either move on or you get moved on. And the people who are nice or good to work for, you continue to work for longer. And I think that's the same with captains. And with owners, it's very tricky. The captain has not that much power because the owner will say, right, thank you, had enough of you, off you go. And I think basically it comes down to you have to have the courage of your convictions, and you have to be proud, and you have to say, this is not the environment that I want to work in, and I'm moving on. Thank you, but no thank you. And that goes from the top to the bottom of yachting. It's a peculiar industry. It's very fractured, so it's difficult. All the circumstances are difficult, and personalities play a large part in it. So yeah, you really have to move away from unpleasant and unconstructive environments. And I think that, you know, the last thing I'll say is also, which is just to reiterate other points, you do have to stand up for what you think is right and report things and take that responsibility and take the hassle and the effort and the discomfort that that's going to cause. But the owner is very difficult to control.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Tom, on all levels. And myself, I stand up to them. I tell them when I don't agree with something, when I feel that something is wrong. And I stand strong in my values and my morals. And if you want to fire me for standing up to you for something that's wrong, so be it. Because I'll probably hit the end of the dock and have another job before I get to the end of the dock, you know? And so, but it's, I have no problems standing up to an owner at all and telling them what's right and wrong. And I also have no problem walking away from it. And in some instances, you know, it would just be as if you're in a job in the real world and you don't like your employer, you can't get along with your employer, they're no good, then leave. Stay strong in your morals and your convictions.
Marianne, this is going to be really hard hitting for a management company. What would you do? Let's face it, management company owners are paying you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we don't have to stay with the really bad ones, the same as the captains. So that, you know, because I'm trying to think of whether we've had something like that, but wouldn't have said that would be a standalone, that they're only bad in that department.
It would make it hard to work. They would probably be very difficult clients that you wouldn't want to have anyways, right?
Well, that's right. They probably don't want to spend the money, and so it's probably part of a bigger problem. But I know that there's been a couple of instances over my long time with the company where we've had a guest more than an owner who maybe went a little bit too far with one of the girls. And they have been spoken to, or in the case of charter guests, removed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes it's, you know, it is the guy just got the wrong messages, maybe whatever, but he said, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I shouldn't have done that, said that, whatever. But we would address it.
Good. I know that obviously your management company is incredibly well run. Unfortunately, it's not the same for many others. When somebody does approach the management company with an issue, should there be a follow-up? You know, should the crew member be kept in the loop? What happens if they're not? What happens if it's a situation that we have actually mentioned before? It's like management company siding with the captain or the chief engineer or the DPA or whatever, and it's just all brushed underneath the carpet. And suddenly, sorry, you're not actually required anymore. Thank you very much.
Well, of course, if they fire us, there's nothing we can do anyway, is there? But if we've got an accusation and we have to do an investigation, and maybe, you know, maybe the captain is best mates with somebody in the company, we'll make sure that those people are not involved in the investigation. So we try and put as neutral a party as possible into the situation.
Great.
So we do try and do that. At the end of the day, you know, you might have an owner who says, oh, it is the captain, I know, but I love him. And
yeah, when that happens as
you know,
well.
so many of us got our hands tied. And again, it's a question, do you want to keep working with those people? So you have to make those decisions. But I think genuinely, with the team we've got here, we've got somebody who is a human resources manager. So we're really putting the expertise in. We try to be really neutral and sympathetic to both sides, because we have had situations that both parties seem to have misunderstood where they were. let's put it that way. So we've ended up with two traumatized people because one thought that wrong was done to them and the other one really genuinely didn't realize. So we try and deal with these things as sympathetically and professionally as we can.
Right.
And sometimes you can't get resolution. It is he said, she said. And at that point, maybe both of them have just got to move on to a new life.
And that's not easy when it's in the middle of a charter trip, really, is it?
No,
As well? The captain is between a rock and a hard place. You got guests on board. It's in the middle of the season, and you have an incident on board.
It's hard.
It's hard.
It's hard because you've got management and the owner breathing down your neck to make sure that the trip happens, but yet it's tugging at you as a captain, knowing that you want to take care of your crew. Gee, I see that question, and that's hard. I've been in that situation, and it's a balancing act for sure, because you're trying to balance the safety of the crew, but then what the guests and the management want. Then if you've got charter guests on board, it's a hard one.
Yeah, and you're all really tired because you've been at it for 14 days. And
yeah, exactly. One last question, and because I know that we're so close on time at the moment, and this has just been such an interesting and informative webinar, and we haven't even really touched the subject of that much as well, but more to come. However, Fanny and Rob, I know that crew members, we actually are quite well paid for our position on board. But, at the end of the day, if it is a junior crew member who actually hasn't got that much money, or say that they've got financial commitments as well on shore, and they really do feel that they want to take a case to the legal actions, they can't afford it. Where can they go? What's the sort of ballpark? How could you help somebody in that situation? And at the end of the day, could you give an indication of what sort of costs it would encompass for a crew member to take legal action?
Well, in the US, if it's a serious matter that an attorney would want to take on, this kind of action is a tort. It's a civil, it's a civil wrong at the very least, and they will often take that kind of case on a contingency. Now, that's a lot of jurisdictions don't permit lawyers to work on a contingency, but at least in the US they do.
Yes, French lawyers were not allowed to work only on a result fee, so we would have to have a fixed fee, legal fee as well. That's sufficient to not be considered as irrelevant. And the problem is that in France, the police does not speak French. So I see a lot of cases of junior crews. Sometimes they do dock walking on a tourist visa. They get embarked on a foreign flag vessel stamped out of Europe. And then there is this blackmailing about reputation and immigration and undeclared work. And I wanted to come back on that point just to say that under French law, only the employer can be prosecuted for undeclared work. And the immigration aspect of it is a totally different sphere. So so you shouldn't be worried not to report in that kind of situation. And in terms of cost, to come back to your question, usually these cases of harassment, sexual abuse, etc., they come within a labour court procedure to ask also for money for undeclared work or unpaid wages or such things, or when you are dismissed for no legal reason. And what I usually ask as a fee is 1 month's salary, because that's gives me an indication of how much money the person has and what is the overall case going to be. And that can be paid in several times. when people don't have money or have commitment, they send money to their family, if they're Filipinos or even South Africans or Colombians, or I've had lots of nationalities come to me, and I can find an arrangement, but within the fact that I have to have a fixed legal fee, because ethically I cannot work only on a result fee.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. Before we end, I would just like to say that one person, one organisation cannot make the changes that are needed in this industry. It will take all of us collectively to do so. Crew, you need to be brave and report incidences so that action can be taken. And stakeholders, captains, and HODs, you need to become better leaders and mentors. We all strive for honesty, transparency, and the safety in this industry and workplace. And I'd also like to say a very special thank you to Yachting International Radio and Rear for their voice and all they do for the community, because they've got a big voice. So thank you for that. So on that note, thank you so much to the panel. You've been incredible. Your time has been completely invaluable, and on behalf of all of the attendees, thank you so much. Thank you, crew, attendees, for your time today. I do wish you a very festive season. Stay safe. Till next year. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.